Hello everybody, Maven here, and Edge of Fate is only a month away, and last week we got the new artifact revealed to us, so we know that the season is going to be based around Stasis, Solar, and Strand. So today we're going to go over the top 3 Solar builds, one on each character, that are going to be really juicy heading into the Edge of Fate with the new artifact mods. And then in the next video we'll do the same thing for Stasis builds, and the following video, Strand builds. So if that sounds like a good time to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Do not miss out. That stuff is on the way very soon. But today is Solar Day, and I'll be sure to leave timestamps down below if you'd like to skip around to your preferred character, and let's break down some builds. Hope you enjoy. Shout out to our sponsor, Advanced GG, the #1 gaming supplement in the world. Use code MAVEN at checkout for 10% off. Link down below. Thank you. So we're going to kick things off here with the Titan, and before anyone asks, no, I do not believe that new Thor's Hammer Titan exotic will be the meta for Solar Titan, but that's a topic for another video, hint hint. Now, everything in me wants to tell you that the Severance Enclosure will be the way to go. I am a firm Severance Enclosure believer. And there's even another Solar Titan build that I want to try as well, but I'm going to keep that one as a surprise after Edge of Fate comes out. But for now, I gotta give it up for the Peacekeepers this time. I've covered Peacekeepers a lot on the channel recently. We just got the reissued No Survivors in Right of the Nine with extremely nasty rolls such as Rewind Rounds and Incandescent, which pairs super well with the Peacekeepers, because the Peacekeepers ramps up your SMG damage on sustained shots wearing off after a second of not hitting anything. Here are the values a shot grants a stack. Stacks up to 20 times, granting a 100% damage buff at max stacks. Synergizes perfectly with Rewind Rounds, since that perk essentially doubles your mag size, given that you land all your shots, which in turn gives you more time to abuse that 100% damage buff. And then you got Incandescent, which is the best ad clear perk in the game. So in a nutshell, Peacekeepers turns SMGs into MGs. That's about it. It takes the S out of SMG. Now, why is this the best Solar Titan build heading into the new season? Why would I have the audacity to say this is going to be better than the classic Bonk build with Synthoceps? Well, don't get me wrong, Syntho Bonk is still very strong and you can never go wrong, and I'm sure many players will be doing that, Salta Greppo included. But if we take a look at some of the new artifact mods, I think you'll start to see my point. So first of all, we got Fever and Chill, which says that rapid precision hits with solar weapons make you radiant. So that's the first thing. And then we got Elemental Overdrive, which says picking up an elemental pickup grants increased damage to weapons of the same element. And finally, we got Radiant Shrapnel, which says dealing sustained weapon damage while radiant or defeating a scorched combatant with a weapon causes targets to release solar projectiles that deal damage and scorch on impact. And it's because of all 3 of these weapon-based artifact mods that I have a big hunch that solar guns will be meta next season. So no grenade launchers, no glaives, no rocket sidearms, no bonk. I'm talking guns that can hit crits and preferably fast, such as SMGs and auto rifles, maybe even any kind of solar primary for that matter. So no bonks, no other stuff. We gotta use guns for these artifact mods. Only gun damage will make this solar shrapnel. Now, we don't know what this quote-unquote solar shrapnel looks like or how strong it will be, but the fact that it scorches alone is enough for it to be considered good, because that triggers certain solar fragments, such as things like Ember of Singeing to grant class ability, as well as Searing to grant melee energy and create fire sprites. So this is why I feel Peacekeepers plus No Survivors is like a very safe pick for Solar Titan to bring into the Edge of Fate, given that they bounty prep and unlock these artifact mods on day 1. So with that said, let us break down the build. So for our first aspect, we got Soul Invictus, which is really important because it's going to be our only method of proccing restoration via walking through a sunspot upon scoring a kill against a scorched combatant or defeating a combatant with a solar ability. And then we can proceed to extend that restoration forever with Ember of Empyrean, which sends as solar final blows extend the duration of radiant and restoration. So that's perfect synergy with the sunspots and the radiant from the new artifact mod. Then to quickly skim over the rest of the subclass, here's what we're working with. The other aspect doesn't really matter, but I am running Roaring Flames in case I find the opportunity to bonk. Then we got Searing for fire sprites, Ashes for more scorch, and Solace to make our restoration and radiance last longer. For our mod setup, it's solely based around utilizing triple solar surges on our boots for a 22% damage buff and then boost that with time dilation. Stack that on top of Radiant as well as our new artifact mod that'll give us another damage boost for picking up fire sprites, and pair that with Peacekeepers, and our SMG will be absolutely shredding things like a hot knife through butter. It's not even funny. At a certain point, you just feel bad for the enemy. Now, we don't know how strong the artifact mod buff will be, but the fact that it is any buff at all is good enough for me. Back to our mods, we got to make orbs for our Surges, which we can do via Heavy-Handed, Reaper, Firepower, and Harmonic Siphon. The rest of our mods aren't too worth breaking down since we are on a time crunch today, as we still got to get to our Warlock and Hunter builds. I guess one thing to point out is that we got Proximity Ward for an overshield while performing a finisher, which pairs extremely well with Restoration Ritual, which is the origin trait on our No Survivors, comboing extremely well with Rewind rounds, allowing it to have an absurdly large mag size. And that gives us ample time to abuse the heck out of the Peacekeeper's buff. So we want to try to spam those finishers here and there whenever we get the chance. Now, shameless plug, I did do a full breakdown on No Survivors plus Peacekeepers on a Strand build, and I'll link that video in the top right corner if you want to see it showcased in further detail. Anyways, onto our loadout. In the kinetic slot, as much as it kills me to not run my favorite weapon, the Supremacy, we gotta run that Tenacious Mastery with Chill Clip. Why? Well, because we have another new artifact mod called Cauterized Darkness, which says Stasis or Strand debuffed non-boss combatants take increased solar damage from all sources. So we just pop them with a Chill Clip shot, they get slowed, and suddenly all our solar stuff gets boosted. Tenacious Mastery was already the best weapon in the game as it was, but this artifact mod alone is going to make it even better. Mark my words, everyone will be using Tenacious because of this mod. This is just everything. Anyways, moving on to the heavy slot, we got the Dragon's Breath, because when we pair that with Radiant Shrapnel, it's a DOT lingering source of weapon damage, allowing it to generate a ton of solar shrapnel while we are taking the time off to pop our Hammer of Soul Super. So that's the loadout, and I would normally go over the stats of the build, but the stats are getting a huge rework in Edge of Fate, so that remains to be seen. And that about wraps up our Titan build for the day, and now we are moving on to the Hunter. And for this one, we are going with the young Ahamkara Spine, and I believe this thing will be nutty in the Edge of Fate. So this exotic was so good that it did take a massive nerf a couple years ago, but recently, a few months ago, they unnerfed it, and it is back to its former glory, and it is beautiful, but nobody uses it, and that is probably about to change. So this exotic buffs your trip mine grenades. It makes them tougher to destroy, makes them linger longer, and makes you immune to self-damage with them. But the thing we care about the most above all else is that ability damage will restore trip mine energy. And yes, solar ignitions do count as ability damage. So yes, Gunpowder Gamble will refund trip mine energy because it's essentially just a throwable ignition. So as you can tell by the background gameplay, this build is pretty much as ability spammy as it gets. You just have about infinite abilities, infinite Gunpowder Gamble, infinite trip mines, infinite knives because of the knock 'em down aspect, which buffs your super as well as refunds your throwing knives if they pick up a kill while you're radiant. And that will be guaranteed because Ember of Torches makes us radiant on throwing knife hits. Now, yes, we do have that artifact mod Fever and Chill that makes us radiant on sustained solar weapon crits, but Ember of Torches will still be pretty decent for consistency's sake. But now, why young Ahamkara Spine over all of the other Solar Hunter exotics? Why this one? Why not something like Celestial? It's an ability spam exotic. It has nothing to do with gunplay, and like I said earlier on Titan, gunplay will be extremely good for Solar next season. But the reason is because we have another new artifact mod called Shield Crush. Now this artifact mod does a plethora of things for each element, but what it does for Solar is while you are radiant, grenades recharge faster and deal increased damage. And will basically always be radiant with this build. So essentially, it's as though we have Verity's Brow active at all times just for free, which sounds insane on paper. Now, once again, we have no data as to what degree this buff will be, but seeing how gnarly heavy ordnance regeneration was this season on the artifact, I'm guessing this one will be pretty significant as well. So yeah, faster and stronger trip mines paired with the fact that we can spam them non-stop means this is going to be a pretty gross build. Depending on how significant that artifact mod will be, there's a strong chance this could be one of the most broken meta builds next season that people will use to melt bosses. Because between Gambler's Dodge, Knife Spam with Solar Ignitions as well, you can just spam an ungodly amount of abilities at a single boss target. And I'll show you an example of that at Pharisia. And I'm pairing this along with a Demolitionist Rocket Launcher, the Roar of the Bear, and you can see just how wild the synergy is. It feels like the ability spam just does not end. Now I'm using Blade Barrage for burst damage, but this combo actually does work extremely well with a 6-shooter golden gun as well, and I'll show you an example of that. You can just pop your Goldie and go shoot nade, shoot nade, shoot nade, and repeat the loop. Because remember that young Ahamkara Spine makes it so ability damage refunds trip mine energy, and that Goldie shot counts as ability damage. So you can just spam to your heart's content. And if this new artifact mod buffs your nades by a decent amount, this combo is gonna go crazy next season and maybe take over the meta. As it is, I already saw somebody solo the Caretaker with this build, so it's actually serious and not just some meme build. So now with that explained, let's break down the build. Now, here's the subclass setup. Already went over Knock 'em Down, Gunpowder Gamble, and Torches, but you'll notice that we don't have Empyrean, so how are we gonna stay alive? Well, firstly, Searing creates fire sprites and then allows Mercy to grant us restoration upon grabbing fire sprites, and then Resolve cures us upon grenade final blows. Additionally, moving on to our mod setup, recuperation on our boots is going to be huge for us, healing us whenever we grab orbs of power, which we can make via siphon and heavy-handed. Now, I do have a single solar surge with time dilation, and the reason for only running one is because we're also comboing that with the special finisher setup, with charged up on the chest and stacks on the boots for maximum armor charge efficiency and spamability of special finishers, so that we can try to have infinite ammo for our Tenacious Mastery. Yes, once again, we're rocking the Tenacious Mastery because Cauterized Darkness is just too good not to run. Once again, we're running the Dragon's Breath here because it gives you that lingering weapon source DOT to continuously proc Radiant Shrapnel on enemies. And while that Dragon's Breath combo is eating away at the target, we can swap to Tenacious, chill them out, get Cauterized Darkness online to essentially apply that pseudo weaken, and that Shrapnel is going to be cooking. And we can also spam Tenacious in between our ability spam, which will allow us to shred things like champions and such. But unlike Titan, Dragon's Breath actually serves a double purpose here, because remember what I said earlier about solar ignitions counting as solar ability damage, thus refunding trip mine energy? Well, the Dragon's Breath does nothing but cause solar ignitions nonstop, therefore allowing us to just spam a ton of trip mines back to back. So the synergy here is amazing. So it's just such a good thing to run, but when it comes to our energy slot, regular viewers of this channel might be confused, because I've stated time and time again about how auto rifles fail in comparison to things like SMGs and hand cannons, but not this time, because we're specifically rocking the Summoner with Heal Clip and Golden Tricorn. Now this thing is hecking incredible for us here in multiple ways. One, without Ember of Empyrean on this build, I needed every possible avenue of survival I could get my hands on, and this thing has Heal Clip, so box number one, checked. Secondly, we also need a fast-firing solar weapon to proc Fever and Shield to make us Radiant, which a 600 auto rifle would arguably be the best at, so box number two, checked. And finally, Golden Tricorn is typically an average perk, but this thing being an extremely ability spammy build, it's going to be unbelievably, stupidly easy to proc that second stack, which is fully refreshable and grants us a 50% damage buff for 10 seconds. Pair that 50% buff along with Radiant Surge as well as Elemental Overdrive, and our Summoner is basically a heavy machine gun. I am thoroughly impressed with how hard it's hitting and how well it synergizes with this build. So run this if you got it, but if you don't, it's fine. You can just run whatever solar primary you like. And that's going to do it for our Solar Hunter build. And finally, let's move on to our Solar Warlock build, and that's going to be with the Speaker Sight. And for those who don't know what the Speaker Sight is, which may be like 0.01% of you guys, Speaker Sight is the exotic that turns your healing grenade into a healing turret that shoots at damaged allies and grants them restoration. And it's cool because each of these builds today has like a different new artifact mod that they're based around. And this one is kind of based around Elemental Benevolence, which says that granting allies an elemental buff gives you increased class ability energy, and your healing turrets do that. So you pretty much always have boosted class ability regenerate. Stack that on top of the Ember of Benevolence, which grants you a 400% regenerate to your nade, melee, and class ability after applying an elemental buff such as Restoration or Radiant to allies, and then stack that on top of Ember of Singeing, which grants class ability whenever you scorch a target. And the result of all these things basically means that you can spam your class ability as much as you want. And there's a few things this can achieve, but the main thing is just having infinite Hellion, and that's pretty strong. Hellion's great. It's just a ton of extra damage and Scorch, repeating that loop with Singeing, granting a ton of melee energy, as well as creating fire sprites with Ember of Searing. So it's just pretty solid, but that's only half the battle, because now we come to the other main part of this build, and that's with Tommy's Matchbook, a weapon that's commonly paired with this exotic due to its healing factor. And this is such a strong combination. I literally saw someone solo a Grandmaster Nightfall with Speaker's Sight in Tommy's. It's no slouch. Tommy's outputs an absurd amount of damage when you build around it. When you land that trigger, it just builds up so many Scorch stacks. Pair that with our infinite uptime of Hellion, and the ignitions, the damage goes crazy. And the self-damage of Tommy's is usually the problem with it, but we can alleviate that by having Touch of Flame to make our healing turret grant Restoration ×2 instead of Restoration ×1, which is the most powerful form of healing in the game. And then Empyrean is there to extend our Restoration ×2 and our Radiant forever, giving us all the leeway to abuse Tommy's while also making it hit like a semi-truck. And if we take a look at our mods, we also got triple Solar Surges for that 22% damage buff. And I said it twice in this video already, and I'll say it again. I sound like a broken record, but stack that triple Surge with Infinite Radiant, as well as Elemental Overdrive, the new artifact mod, to always have that extra damage boost, and also the fact that Hellion will always be going, and this build absolutely slaps. You are destroying everything in front of you with Tommy's, everything's getting melted, ignited, you're constantly healing with Restoration ×2. If you get low, your turret cures you. It's just such a powerful and consistent build. So continuing with the rest of our mods, I went through a lot of iterations, but this is ultimately what worked out for me, some pretty standard stuff. I did experiment with focusing around grenade spam more, but I felt that this was good enough. We got those infinite Phoenix Dives or Healing Rifts, your choice. We can continually proc Bomber and be in a pretty good spot. Plus, that Shield Crush artifact mod may do nothing for nade damage on that portion of it, but remember that it also does buff your grenade regenerate, which also has amazing synergy with our healing turrets here. So all around, just an incredible and spammy high damaging build. And for our loadout, once again, we got Tanasha's for that Cauterized Darkness buff. Think about it, you chill something out to debuff it while spamming Hellion, and it's just a pretty gross combo. And in that heavy slot, since we can't run Dragon's Breath this time, I just tossed on an Envious Bait and Switch Hezen Vengeance for some high DPS, which also happens to synergize perfectly with Cauterized Darkness, because when you're using Tanasha's, it's not only proccing Bait and Switch, but also proccing that Darkness debuff, so it's a win-win and does a lot of damage with Bait and Switch Hezen Vengeance. And that's going to do it for all 3 solar builds today. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments. And if you completely disagree with these 3 builds, feel free to debate. But these are just my opinions. I feel like these 3 builds have some very good synergy with the new artifact mods and have high potential to be meta. And if you wanted to prepare any of these builds, I'll leave the dim loadout links to all 3 of them down below. And if you got anybody who you think could benefit from these builds as well, I'd appreciate if you consider sharing the video with them. That would really mean a lot. Once again, the stat distributions on the builds remain to be seen, as the stat system is getting a huge rework. But it's mostly the subclass loadouts and mod setups that matter. So get that stuff ready and you'll be good to go when the new season launches. Just make sure to bounty prep a bit to get a few artifact mods as soon as the season launches. I'd recommend doing at least the Petra's Ascendant Challenge bounties on all 3 characters every week, because those give a girthy amount of experience. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit the like button, as it helps out a ton, and consider subscribing if you are new. Would love to have you here for more Edge of Fate content on the way. And in the next video, we'll be doing the same thing, except for some Stasis builds on all 3 characters. So I hope to see you guys there. Peace.